First Contact's folly. The Galactic Confederation's First Contact Protocol was considered flawless after 12,000 years of refinement. Admiral Vector of the Confederation flagship Eternal Order had personally overseen hundreds of first contacts. Yet, as he stared at the holographic display showing the small fleet of Earth vessels approaching Saturn's rings, something felt different. "High Commander, the primitive vessels are maintaining their irregular formation," reported his sensor officer, Third Iketal. "They appear to be dancing." Vector's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of confusion in his species. The human ships were indeed moving in patterns that defied conventional tactical logic. Some spun lazily, others weaved in and out of Saturn's rings, and one particularly small vessel was doing what appeared to be loops around its larger companions. "Open communications," Vector commanded, his voice resonating with the authority of the Confederation. "This is Admiral Vector of the Galactic Confederation. Your species has been deemed sufficiently advanced for first contact. Power down your engines and prepare for inspection." The response came through and clear, translated basic, accompanied by what his systems identified as music. "This is Captain Maya Rodriguez of the Earth Defense Force. We'd love to power down, but we're currently in the middle of a very important scientific experiment. We're testing if it's possible to write our names in Saturn's rings using our engine trails. Want to join? We got room for a few more letters." Vector's command staff exchanged bewildered looks. This wasn't in any first contact protocol. "Your behavior is irregular," Vector stated firmly. "Our scans indicate your vessels possess significant military capability. Explain your hostile movements." A different human voice cut in, hostile. "Oh man, you should see us when we're actually being hostile. This is just Tuesday entertainment. Hey, did anyone tell them about the time we painted a smiley face on Mars using rover tracks?" "Captain Rodriguez," Vector tried again, "your species' approach to space travel appears chaotic." "Thank you." Multiple human voices responded simultaneously, followed by what his translator identified as laughter. Vector's flagship deployed its standard intimidation array, a massive holographic display of its full combat capabilities. It was a sight that had caused many emerging civilizations to immediately surrender. The humans responded by creating a crude stick figure animation using their ship's formation, complete with what appeared to be jazz hands. "Invalid response," Vector announced, his professional demeanor cracking slightly. "You will comply with standard first contact protocols or what?" Rodriguez interrupted cheerfully. "You'll blast us with those fancy weapons you're displaying. The ones using quantum cascade technology that we've already figured out how to disrupt using modified microwave ovens and some clever coding." Vector's antennae went rigid. That technology was supposed to be undetectable, let alone counterable. "Impossible. Your civilization has barely achieved system-wide travel." "Yeah, but we've had hot pockets and microwave technology for decades. You'd be amazed what humans can do with consumer electronics and boredom. Speaking of which, how do you feel about cat videos? We've got about 8 zettabytes worth we'd love to share." As if to demonstrate their point, one of the human ships projected a massive hologram of what appeared to be a small furry creature knocking objects off an elevated surface. Vector's third heart began to palpitate. Nothing in his 12,000 years of first contact experience had prepared him for this. The humans weren't following any known pattern of technological or social development. They were simultaneously primitive and advanced, organized and chaotic, serious. And what was that Earth ship doing now? "Sorry about that." Rodriguez's voice came through again. "Lieutenant Chen just discovered we can use the magnetic field generators to make our ships breakdance. We're still working out the kinks." "Admiral," Catal whispered urgently, "their ship's erratic movements are making it impossible for our targeting systems to establish locks. It appears to be accidental." Vector stared at the display, watching as the human fleet continued their incomprehensible dance through space. somehow managing to look both completely unthreatening and absolutely impossible to attack effectively. "Captain Rodriguez," he finally said, his voice carrying the weight of a being who had just realized the universe was far stranger than previously thought. "Perhaps we should discuss this cultural exchange over what you humans call coffee." "Now you're talking," Rodriguez replied. "Fair warning, though, we might have weaponized that too. Not intentionally, mind you. We just really like our caffeine strong." As Vector watched the human ships form what appeared to be a conga line through Saturn's rings, he realized that the Confederation's first contact protocols were about to undergo some significant revisions. The galaxy, it seemed, wasn't ready for humanity. But then again, maybe that was exactly what it needed. The art of human chaos. Senior Analyst Sixtall of the Galactic Confederation stood before the High Council, her tentacles twitching with barely contained frustration. The holographic display behind her showed dozens of human ship movement patterns, each more confounding than the last. "Honorable Council," she began, "after 3 months of intensive study, I regret to report that human battle tactics remain incomprehensible." She gestured to one of the displays. "This is what they call the donut formation. As you can see, it serves no tactical purpose, yet they consistently achieve remarkable results with it." The council chamber erupted in murmurs as the display showed human ships flying in perfect circles while simultaneously engaging multiple targets. One council member's chromatophores flashed in confusion. "What you're seeing isn't even their most bizarre strategy," Sixtall continued. "Last week, they introduced something they call the Space Roomba Protocol. They claim it's inspired by an ancient Earth cleaning device. Their ships move in seemingly random patterns that somehow manage to sweep enemy fleets into precise tactical positions." Supreme Counselor Vendra leaned forward. Surely their military commanders must follow some form of logical doctrine. Sixtall's skin shifted to a deep shade of embarrassment. "That's another issue, Supreme Counselor. Their command structure is unusual. During our joint exercises, we discovered that human captains often engage in something called freestyle tactical jazz. They improvise their strategies in real time, often while exchanging what they call memes over the command channel." The hologram shifted to show a recent training exercise. A human fleet was facing off against a superior Confederation force. Instead of retreating or following standard tactical procedures, the human ships began executing a complex series of maneuvers while their commanders debated the relative merits of something called pineapple on pizza. "As you can see," Sixtall explained, "while having this seemingly irrelevant discussion, they managed to outflank our forces 3 times and simulate the destruction of our flagship. When asked about their strategy, they claimed they were just vibing." A younger council member raised a manipulator. "Perhaps we could analyze their training programs to better understand their methods." Sixtall's skin rippled with what the council recognized as suppressed laughter. "We tried. Their primary training simulator is something called Kerbal Space Program. It's a game. They learn advanced orbital mechanics and spacecraft design by launching primitive digital creatures into space, often unsuccessfully." The display shifted again, showing the human ship executing an impossible maneuver through an asteroid field. This pilot claims she learned this technique while playing something called asteroid drift. Tokyo Space. When we pointed out that the maneuver violates 3 laws of physics, she just shrugged and said, "Physics is more like guidelines anyway." Supreme Counselor Vendra Scales had taken on a distinctly worried hue. "Are you suggesting, Analyst Sixtall, that the humans are actually more effective because they don't follow conventional tactical doctrine?" "That appears to be the case, Supreme Counselor. Their chaos has patterns we simply cannot predict. Last week, a human captain won a simulated engagement by blasting something called "Never Gonna Give You Up" on all frequencies, while their ships performed what they termed a flash mob formation. The tactic was so confusing that 3 of our eye-targeting systems crashed trying to predict their next move. And their explanation for this success: Zixtal's voice modulator produced what could only be described as a sigh. They said, and I quote, "Sometimes the best strategy is to embrace the chaos and just roll with it." They then proceeded to teach our junior officers something called the Macarena as a way to loosen up our tactical thinking. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Confederation had spent millennia perfecting the art of space warfare, creating intricate battle doctrines and precise tactical formulas. And now here were the humans, treating space combat like an improvisational dance party, and somehow doing it better. "There is one more thing," Zixtal added hesitantly. "The humans have offered to host what they call a space rave to demonstrate their more creative combat techniques. They specifically requested permission to, and I quote, drop the bass so hard it registers on gravitational sensors." Supreme Counselor Vendra's scales shifted through several colors before settling on a resigned blue. Perhaps it's time the Confederation learned to embrace a little chaos of our own. As if to punctuate her point, the holographic display showed a human ship successfully executing a combat maneuver while its crew performed something called the wave. The art of human chaos had begun to spread, and the galaxy would never be the same. Cultural confusion. Cultural Exchange Officer Dr. Kelvin stared at his datapad in complete bewilderment. After 6 months of studying human culture, he was beginning to suspect that either his translation matrix was malfunctioning or humans were even more bizarre than initially thought. "Captain Rodriguez," he said carefully, addressing the human officer across the conference table aboard the Confederation diplomatic vessel Eternal Discourse. "You're telling me that humans intentionally consume a neurotoxin called caffeine, knowing it can cause anxiety and sleeplessness, because it helps you function." Maya Rodriguez took a long sip from her coffee mug, which bore the text, "I like my coffee like I like my space battles. Chaos with a side of VIST. "Oh, that's just the beginning, Dr. Kelvin. Wait until I tell you about energy drinks. Some of us mix those with coffee." Kelvin's secondary hearts skipped a beat. "But why?" "Because sleep is for the weak and deadlines are strong," another human officer chimed in, raising his own mug in solidarity. "Plus, how else would we come up with our best terrible ideas?" Terrible ideas. Kelvin's translation matrix struggled with the contradiction. "Sure. Like that time we figured out we could use the quantum harmonics from our ship's coffee makers to disrupt enemy targeting systems. Started as a caffeine-fueled joke at 3 a.m., ended up becoming standard tactical doctrine." Kelvin made a note on his datapad. The Confederation's Science Council was still trying to understand how the humans had weaponized beverage preparation equipment. He decided to change the subject. "Let's discuss your entertainment formats. Our cultural database is particularly confused by something called memes. They appear to be deliberately poor-quality images with text." Rodriguez grinned. "Oh yeah, memes are pretty much our primary form of communication now. In fact, we've started using them in diplomatic negotiations. You should have seen the Regellian ambassador's face when we responded to their trade proposal with a stonks image. But how does one derive meaning from such chaos?" Kelvin's sensory tendrils were beginning to ache. "That's the neat part, you don't. The confusion is half the fun. Speaking of fun, have you guys ever heard of dad jokes?" Before Kelvin could respond, another human officer spoke up. "Hey, what do you call a black hole that's really good at singing?" "A supernovacalist." The humans in the room burst into laughter, while the Confederation representatives sat in confused silence. Kelvin's universal translator reported multiple errors trying to process the wordplay. "I don't understand," Kelvin admitted. "The joke appears to be intentionally bad, yet it causes you joy." "Exactly." Rodriguez beamed. "The worse the joke, the better it is. It's like tactical confusion. Sometimes the best way to win is to make absolutely no sense." Kelvin's datapad was now filled with contradictions and paradoxes. "Your species appears to thrive on deliberate inefficiency and confusion. How did you ever advance to become a spacefaring civilization? Oh, that's easy, Rodriguez replied, reaching for the coffee pot. We just keep throwing weird ideas at problems until something works. Like, did you know we originally developed FTL travel because someone watched an old sci-fi show and said, hey, what if we tried that, but with memes? The room fell silent as Kelvin processed this information. You achieved faster than light travel because of entertainment media. Well, that in spite. Someone said it was impossible, so naturally, we had to prove them wrong. Speaking of which, who wants to hear about the time we terraformed Mars out of sheer stubbornness? As Rodriguez launched into another story that defied conventional logic, Kelvin made a final note in his cultural report. Humans appear to operate on a fundamental principle that can only be described as chaos theory meets stand-up comedy. Their greatest strength may be that they don't realize things are supposed to be impossible. Later that day, when Kelvin submitted his report to the Confederation Council, he attached a special addendum. Warning: extended exposure to human culture may cause spontaneous development of sense of humor and decreased regard for logical consistency. Side effects may include sudden appreciation for puns and reduced fear of impossible tasks. The Council's response was unprecedented. They laughed. It seemed humanity's influence was already spreading, one terrible joke at a time. As if to prove the point, the next day's diplomatic session began with a Confederation admiral attempting to tell a joke about quantum mechanics. It was horrible, made no sense, and somehow perfectly captured the essence of human-alien relations. The humans gave it a standing ovation. Battlefield ballet. Admiral Vector watched through the command center's viewport as the joint Human Confederation fleet prepared for their first cooperative military exercise. After months of cultural exchange and tactical integration, the Confederation had finally agreed to attempt what the humans called freestyle combat choreography. All ships report ready, Admiral, announced Kittle, who had recently started wearing a human-inspired cap with the phrase Chaos Coordinator emblazoned across it. The humans are suggesting we begin with something called Operation Space Jam. Vector's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. Proceed, and may the eternal order preserve us. The exercise began traditionally enough, with both fleets facing a simulated enemy force of automated drones. The Confederation ships moved in their usual precise formations, executing textbook maneuvers with mathematical precision. Then the humans started their part. Is that music? Vector asked as a rhythmic beat filled the command channel. Affirmative, Catal replied, trying to hide his growing enthusiasm. Captain Rodriguez says it's essential to setting the mood. The human ships suddenly broke formation, each vessel moving to what appeared to be a completely random position. The Confederation tactical officers watched in horror as carefully planned formations dissolved into what looked like complete chaos. They're going to get themselves killed, muttered one of Vector's junior officers. But then something extraordinary happened. The human ships began moving in patterns that seemed to flow with the music. Their apparently random positions had created perfect firing lanes through gaps in the enemy formation that shouldn't have existed. Each human vessel moved as if in a choreographed dance, covering each other's blind spots while simultaneously executing impossible maneuvers. How are they coordinating? Vector demanded, watching as a human corvette spun through space while firing precisely targeted shots that somehow threaded between friendly ships to hit multiple targets. They're not, sir, Catal replied, checking his readings. They're improvising. Captain Rodriguez says they're vibing with the flow. The simulated enemy AI, programmed with thousands of years of Confederation tactical doctrine, was failing catastrophically to predict human movements. Every attempt to counter their maneuvers was met with even more unpredictable responses. Did that ship just use an emergency atmospheric burn to propel itself backward while firing? Vector asked, his professional composure cracking. Yes, sir. The human pilot says she saw it in an anime once and thought it looked cool. As the battle progressed, something even more unexpected began to happen. Some of the Confederation ships started to break from their rigid formations, attempting to match the humans' fluid style. A Confederation cruiser executed a clumsy but effective spin maneuver, drawing cheers from the human crews. "Nice moves." Rodriguez's voice came through the comm. "Now you're getting it. Remember, space ballet is all about feeling the rhythm." Vector watched in amazement as his fleet, trained for generations in precise military doctrine, began to move with increasing confidence in this new dynamic style. Ships that had never deviated from standard patterns were now executing maneuvers that would have gotten their commanders court-martialed a month ago. The simulated enemy forces didn't stand a chance. Their programming couldn't adapt to the combination of Confederation precision and human chaos. When the exercise ended, the joint fleet had achieved the highest success rate in Confederation history. Analysis. Vector asked, still trying to process what he had witnessed. Kittel consulted his displays. "Sir, by all traditional metrics, what we just did should have been a catastrophic failure. Instead," he paused, double-checking his readings, "we just established 17 new tactical precedents and broke 12 records for combat efficiency." "How?" Captain Rodriguez suggests it's because we stopped thinking and started feeling the groove. Vector was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he turned to his communications officer. "Send a message to Confederation Command. Tell them we need to update our combat doctrine, and ask the humans if they can recommend something called a playlist." As the fleet regrouped, human ships could be seen executing victory rolls while Confederation vessels attempted to mimic them. The resulting patterns were awkward but somehow effective, much like the emerging partnership between the two species. "Sir," Kittel reported with barely contained excitement, "the humans are suggesting we try something called Operation Disco Inferno next. They say, and I quote, 'This is where the real fun begins.'" Vector found himself doing something he'd never done on the bridge before. He laughed. "Very well. Let's see what other impossible things we can achieve today." As the fleet prepared for their next exercise, the stars themselves seemed to twinkle in anticipation of what this unusual partnership would produce next. The age of rigid conformity in space combat was over. The era of tactical jazz had begun. Laughter in the void. The situation in the Orion sector should have been dire. A swarm of self-replicating machines had emerged from deep space, threatening both human and Confederation territories. The machines operated with perfect logic, their attacks calculated with mathematical precision that even the Confederation found intimidating. But in the combined command center of the human Confederation defense fleet, the atmosphere was surprisingly light. "So," Captain Maya Rodriguez said, gesturing to the holographic display showing the approaching swarm, "who's ready to throw some chaos at these perfectly ordered murderbots?" Admiral Vector, who had recently started keeping a collection of human coffee mugs on his command console, found himself smiling. "What do you have in mind, Captain?" "Well," Rodriguez grinned, pulling up a series of tactical displays. "Remember that thing we did during training? Operation Space Jam. I'm thinking something like that, but with a twist. We call it Operation Rickroll the Robots." The gathered officers, human and alien alike, leaned in as Rodriguez outlined her plan. It was absolutely insane. It violated at least 15 laws of physics. It required precise coordination while simultaneously demanding complete chaos. It was, in other words, perfectly human. "The swarm operates on pure logic," Rodriguez explained, sipping from her newest mug. "Chaos. Because someone has to keep the universe interesting. So we give them something their logic can't process, a combination of absolute precision and complete unpredictability." Kittel, now sporting both his Chaos Coordinator cap and a shirt reading Tactical Jazz Enthusiast, nodded enthusiastically, like attempting to divide by zero. "Exactly, but with spaceships and terrible music." The plan was set in motion. As the machine swarm approached, the combined fleet took up positions that looked random, but were actually calculated down to the millimeter. a perfect blend of human chaos and Confederation precision. Then they began broadcasting. Thousands of different signals flooded space. Ancient human memes, cat videos, dad jokes, and multiple versions of "Never Gonna Give You Up," all precisely timed and mathematically coordinated to create interference patterns that disrupted the swarm's communication networks. The machine's first wave faltered as their logic engines encountered content they couldn't process. How could something be so bad it's good? Why were humans intentionally using inefficient tactics that somehow produced optimal results? What was the tactical purpose of Keyboard Cat? They're trying to adapt, Call reported excitedly. Their algorithms are attempting to find patterns in our behavior. Good luck with that, Rodriguez laughed. We've been trying to figure ourselves out for thousands of years. The combined fleet moved like dancers in a cosmic ballet, each ship's movements simultaneously precise and unpredictable. Confederation vessels executed perfect maneuvers while human ships improvised in the gaps, creating combat patterns that looked like chaos but worked with devastating effectiveness. The machine swarm's perfect formations began to break down as their prediction algorithms crashed trying to analyze human behavior patterns. Every time they adapted to one strategy, the fleet would switch to something completely different but equally effective. Are those Confederation heavy cruisers doing the Macarena? Vector asked, watching his display in amazement. With perfect precision, sir, Catal confirmed proudly. And the humans are freestyle jazz battling in the gaps. The machines never stood a chance. Their logic couldn't handle the combination of mathematical precision and creative chaos. For every logical countermeasure they developed, the fleet had a dozen illogical responses that somehow worked better than they should have. As the last of the swarm disappeared in a series of carefully calculated yet somehow spontaneous explosions, cheers erupted throughout the fleet. Human ships performed victory rolls while Confederation vessels attempted their own celebration maneuvers, creating an impromptu space ballet that would have given their tactical instructors heart attacks just a few months ago. You know what the best part is? Rodriguez said to Vector as they watched the celebration. We just proved that the most powerful force in the universe isn't order or chaos. It's both, working together. Vector nodded, raising his own coffee mug. I like my space battles, like I like my coffee. Impossible to predict. Indeed. Though I must ask, was the synchronized dancing really necessary? Necessary? No. Awesome. Absolutely. As the combined fleet headed home, their ships still moving in that peculiar pattern that somehow merged perfect precision with complete unpredictability, Vector realized something important. The galaxy hadn't just survived its encounter with humanity. It had become better because of it. The Confederation had learned to embrace a little chaos. Humans had learned to appreciate a touch of order. And somewhere in between, they'd created something entirely new. A partnership that proved that sometimes the best way to face the universe was with careful planning, creative thinking, and a really good sense of humor. As if to punctuate this thought, a Confederation battlecruiser attempted a victory barrel roll, failed spectacularly, yet somehow managed to look even more impressive in its failure than it would have in success, just like humanity had been doing all along.